Hi, everyone, and welcome to After Equality. Today is part one of a conversation I had with Raluca Anghel, who is the Golden Business Coach. We just had such a great conversation about her life in Romania and making the move to Western Europe, and then just so many other things. I actually had to split it into two parts. So, this is part one. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. And we can get started. Hi.
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited.
I'm good. I'm good. You're in Prague, right? So it's evening over there?
Correct, right now it's 6:07 p.m. my time.
Oh, so it's like almost dinner time, or it is dinner time.
Not for me specifically. Me and my partner, we eat quite late. I 8 p.m., 9 p.m., so
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for hopping on this call with me either way. I know like with the time difference, like I love Zoom and like this technology because it allows me to connect with people in other parts of the world, but I also understand like there's time zones.
Time zones. Yes, exactly. But it's a wonder. It sounds so cliche, but it's such a wonderful time to live in.
Yeah.
I mean, look at us chatting from completely parts of the world. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. No, totally, for sure. But so again, you're in Prague, but you're originally from Romania. So,
Mhm.
like I think I mentioned this before, like a lot of the learning I'm doing right now and the unlearning and the relearning is really kind of taking on like really and like really listening to and talking to people with life experiences outside of my own and I'm realizing now how much like how American my education is. And so I'm really fascinated talking to people from other parts of the world because I just like I don't like I am kind of that ignorant American where I really don't know that much outside of my own sphere. Like they say you grow up in a bubble, like the bubble is starting to feel smaller and smaller. And so if you wouldn't mind, could you describe your experience growing up in Romania?
My fucking pleasure. Um, so I'm just laughing because it's funny hearing you saying about the ignorant American. I'm like, I mean, you're here doing this work, talking to all these people, so I definitely wouldn't categorize you like that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say that because I was actually giggling at it. So, growing up in Romania, so I come from a smaller town, relatively close to the capital. The capital is called Bucharest, and it's in the southern part of Romania. I come from Ploiești, which is just a bit up north from, like, I literally can go to Bucharest in less than 45 minutes by car. So I'm very close to the capital. So I grew up there. I've had a very happy childhood. Everything was as beautiful as I can imagine. Of course, now as an adult looking back, there are so many things I could pick apart, and there's so many things that weren't ideal, and there were struggles and generational trauma stuff that as a kid I didn't feel that, which is great. I was born in 92, which is actually just a couple of years after the revolution happened. So we had a revolution in 89 in December. Romania has been part of the Soviet Union, and we were a communist political system. So there was a revolution, a people revolution, that ended up quite aggressive, quite aggressive to the point that our former president was actually executed and his wife. So it's how communism was ended in Romania, and it's how it became a democracy. So basically, I grew up in the 90s, which in Romania was a very wobbly time after a long communism, very strict and very, how do I want to say this? Structure. Like, people knew where things belonged. There were like several decades, almost a century of communism. So things were like very well cleared for several generations. So I came up as the first generation, or one of the very first generations, in a democracy, but with parents that grew up in a dictatorship and grandparents who had the same experience.
Right.
And yeah, Romania was probably a bit different because it started. I remember one of the things that happened in the 90s is import started happening very strongly. So many things started opening up, and like while I grew, so many things, like supermarkets weren't a thing. There were markets before, like all these products and all these produce from the western part of Europe started to come in. I have an uncle in Germany who actually he illegally immigrated during communism, because you weren't allowed to leave the country during communism. So some people escaped, and he was one of them, and he was sending us like all these things from Germany. So growing up in Romania was beautiful. I had, of course, my own I think my coach hat is like always on, like I can see all the trauma and stuff. I'm like, do I want to talk about that? No, not
Yeah.
really. But
Yeah,
like
like
my mind goes there. But I'm a single child from an amazing family that struggled, and they did their best. My mom is a very strong woman, and she I don't like calling her a single mom, just because she actually is not a single mom. Like, she met my stepfather when I was 2, and my stepfather is actually my father, like in my heart, and I don't call him stepfather. But biologically, she did go for a divorce, and she did have a lot of the single mother mentality in my very early formative years, which is why I take so much strength from. And yeah, if you have any specific questions about Romania, just throw them my way so I know exactly which part do you want me to like talk a bit more about.
okay. I think I was just so I'm just curious, and I think it's so interesting that you kind of grew up. Okay. So my understanding, because my family's from Taiwan, and so they kind of went through something similar where there was like a revolution with China. So like technically, like, yes, they are a part of China, but they're also they're not technically a part of the People's Republic of China. So they actually also have their own democracy.
Mm-hmm.
They just aren't recognized by the UN as a sovereign, which is a whole other conversation with probably not you, like someone else. But and so it's kind of, I think it's interesting because like in my head, I was just thinking, like, once, like, when you do that kind of government changeover, there's sort of this political vacuum
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing that comes to mind. And so being a generation to grow up in that is like there's just so much uncertainty over it, because like it's my first thought is that there's not going to be like there's no one knows who's in charge. And
And this is exactly what happened in Romania. And
right.
I'm just like, I'm jumping the gun here, but I know that when you and I had our chat before this amazing show, we were talking a bit about the whole, which will come probably in our conversation, the fact that I'm not in Romania right now, and I emigrated when I was 18. So, and that's actually a consequence of this amazing revolution that happened, because everybody was very optimistic, the common people. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the mass people. I'm not talking about political figures and
Mhm.
powerful figures in society who had other ideas, but the common people, the people, were very much, oh yes, democracy, because communism, it reached a point. Communism had a lot, Romania had a lot of benefits. At one point, there were decades where Romania flourished. Like, we had, everything was maximized, and the president called Ceausescu, Nicolae Ceausescu, he maximized all the resources. The agriculture was booming. We had so much infrastructure built. A lot of our amazing monuments we have today, or infrastructural elements, they actually built during communism. For example, we have, if I'm not mistaken, the largest political building in the world, the second one after the Pentagon. It's
Oh, okay.
huge. It's actually the parliament in Bucharest. It's huge. Like, I don't even know how
Wow.
many. Yeah, it's a whole thing. He built that. Like, he had a thing with grandeur. He built that. So of course, I mean, there was some systems into place which actually worked. It happened because of different reasons. Towards the end of communism, Romania was in debt, so they were basically exporting a lot, and they had to reduce the costs. So the people started suffering, right? There were electricity cuts. Like, at night, people wouldn't have heating on or lights on because electricity would be cut off, I think, like 10 p.m.
Uh-huh.
To cut down costs. It started, the food and the foods were actually, we are an agricultural country. We have a lot of land, and we should be
Okay.
able to have everything we need because we have access to sea, fields, hills, mountains. So we have
You have a lot
everything.
of climate.
We have all the climate, the microclimates, all the type of terrain needed to actually do well.
Mhm.
And everything was exported. So basically, people were staying in line to be able to buy 1 kilogram of wheat flour for the whole family. It started becoming like this. So when the democracy came, and I'm speaking this from like on my own knowledge. I'm not a historian and nothing like
Yeah.
this.
No, for sure.
So like if any amazing Romanian historian listen to this and like I'm messing something up, I'm sorry. Okay. But I feel like I'm talking about the things I actually know. And when democracy came, people were like hopeful, genuinely hopeful, like, oh my God, freedom, we can have things, abundance, yay, yay, yay. Because nobody knew exactly who's going to take charge. And that political vacuum happens when such a huge government shift happens. It's a beautiful, I'm sarcastic, obviously, a beautiful field, a fertile field for corruption.
Right.
And corruption grew and sprouted. And because in communism, everything is state owned.
Mhm.
That is the definition. It's like nobody's better here. You don't get to have all these stuff. Other things are owned by the state. Like building your own business and becoming a badass bitch in communism, that's not happen.
Right.
Okay, like it's like,
Yeah.
which is also good because I come from a relatively poor line, tree line of families. So for my generation was actually okay because they were able to afford a car with 4 children. They were able to afford a color TV and get an apartment, which is actually more than some people could now do in Romania because that whole equality thing. There's no
Mhm.
bigger than other. But what happened is factories, lands, all these things were state owned.
Right.
Beautiful, right? But when democracy came, people were actually able to take that for themselves.
Okay.
Political figures that were in charge the first years of democracy, they stole a lot.
Mhm.
Like everything was state owned, they started taking it from themselves, selling it to foreign countries. So growing up in this very unstable democracy,
Right.
um, I didn't actually feel it as a child growing up, but it led up to the formal consequence that things went to shit, and as they were so unstable, corruption became a, a common thing in Romania.
Okay.
Very, very common.
Mhm.
I grew up like being borderline okay with corruption, you know. So when I say corruption, for
It
anybody
was
listening,
normalized.
it's normalized. Like when I say corruption, I'm going to give examples as if you have money in Romania, and I'm talking as an emigrant from Romania since I was 18. That's 10 years. So things have changed, have shifted, have changed. So my experience, lived experience, has ended 10 years ago, but I still have family there. So they didn't change that much. I'm not like completely ignorant about what's happening nowadays. So it's not like now this beautiful non-corruption country, and I'm talking about like something in the past. It's still happening with some
Mhm.
improvements, of course, hopefully. But back then, I mean, I grew up, and a simple example is I don't remember ever going to the doctor without money in my pocket that I would just like, my mom would even teach me how to hand the money to the doctor, you know? So everything is like money comes first, and tips
Mhm.
is like a requirement. So there were people who, if you don't have the money to like give something to the doctor, or the common, any Romanian listening to this, like the common, I'm gonna give them like a pack of coffee and a box of chocolates. It's so typical,
Okay.
so typical, which is something that doesn't happen in Western Europe. Like this is it. You go and you have your insurance, and this covers it, and you pay. This is it. There's no like, I'm paying this is like something for yourself.
Mhm.
That's a very common, something that's so normal. It was so normal in those times. It was so normal for me growing up to acknowledge that money as a cash asset is power in Romania, and that's a corrupted state.
Mm.
Obviously, that's not the best,
Right.
and it ended up being one of the reasons why I decided to emigrate.
Okay, so let's start talking about that. When you made the decision to come to Western Europe
Mm-hmm.
and to seek out opportunities in education, what really drove that? Like why, like what was the shining beacon in Western Europe that you were kind of going towards? Was there one, or was it just like you just wanted to get
No, there was no shiny beacon. So how it started was like this. I wanted to be a district attorney. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go into criminalistic law. It was my desire growing up. I remember it was relatively early. I was like, I want to fight against crime. I wanted to be one of the good guys. I want to be a lawyer. So it kind of was like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a judge. No, a district attorney. At one point, I wanted to be how do you call it? I'm missing the word right now. But it was like specific criminalistic, you know. So I was very much like into anything that's um murder and specifics. I was obsessed watching and reading books about the psychology of criminals and murderers. I was actually very much dedicated to go down that path.
okay.
And my parents were like relatively indulging it until they realized, oh, she's serious. Like she's not. She's been talking since she's 12 about this. She's like 17. She still wants to do this shit. She wants to go to Cluj-Napoca, which is like a city in the northern western part of Romania, where I wanted to go study law there. And so my mom was like, no, let's talk about this. Like, you're not doing this. This is not okay. So we started talking. They tried to convince me. I didn't want to. They put me in contact with several contacts of themselves, of their own, people from the law industry, notaries, judges. And talking to all these people, I basically realized it has been reinforced to me. Raluca, are you aware what you're doing? Because law as an industry in Romania is based on nepotism. Like, this is not something that you're gonna go and be a badass and learn all the things, and then you're gonna get a best mentorship, and you're gonna become a partner in a firm. It doesn't work like that unless you pay for it, or you have somebody in the family or known who's already holding that position.
Mhm.
Nepotism is a thing. And secondly, people knew my heart and like, you're such a kind-hearted human. And in my business, I'm the Golden Business Coach. Golden, one of the things is heart-centered. I've always been heart-centered. They were like, you're not going to be able to actually make it in this industry. Like, you're not going to, because it's not fair. You want to fight the crime, but that's not how law works. Not in Romania, not almost anywhere. It's not like the right person wins. That's not how law works all over the fucking planet, especially not in Romania. So you're gonna end up being heartbroken over and over and over and over again. So they changed my mind. So we had a conversation with my parents where they were like, okay, so what do you want to do if not that? And I'm like, I actually don't know. I wanted that for so many years. And we started talking about business and being a manager. And that was a beautiful conversation. I remember it very well. That's when I realized, okay, I have to study management. Management is good for me. I didn't know what management. And my parents actually had the idea. So I was relatively influenced by my parents in all the positive ways, I would say. They were the ones who were like, okay, but we want you to move abroad. I grew up with parents that we would take our vacations every year abroad. So I did know a bit of Europe. I traveled other countries and I did enjoy them very much. There's a lot of differences in the day-to-day life, in the cultural experience, even just like walking down the street in Romania versus some other countries. It's a different experience, you know.
Right.
So yeah, we started talking, and I was kind of convinced. I don't want to use the word, but it's the truth. I was convinced. Okay, if I want that kind of life, if I want to be that woman with that societal position, with that knowledge, with that uh, posture, literally, the knowledge, the money, the life, it's not in Romania that I'm going to do it. It has to be abroad, and I have to invest in my education. My parents were willing to do that. So I went to university fair when I was 17. We graduated when we were 18. So I was basically like the year before the last in high school. And I went to international university fair in Bucharest. I remember going home with like this huge pile of like, I was like, okay, all the management things come to me, come to me, come to me. And then there was this specific um, university slash school. It's not actually university specifically, called Hotel School The Hague, which is based in Netherlands. And when I spoke to the person there from the admission, I remember the feeling like, oh my God, this is what I have to do. And it's actually business management with a major in hospitality management, right? So hospitality, that's tourism, restaurants, air, aviation, all the things. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. It was at that moment the third one in the world in hospitality management schools. At this moment, I believe it's the fifth, so it's still very, very highly ranked. It's one of the best ones to go to, and I got accepted to that in my it was a huge thing. It was the first time I ever cried out of happiness because it was a huge thing to get accepted to like this kind of prestigious university, which was relatively expensive as it is. You had to pay tuition, and it was a bit out of my parents' budget, but I was so committed to it. And that's how I ended up living in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, a country I've never been to before I actually moved there that day. I didn't even go to visit it, the campus or anything, because they were doing admissions throughout Europe. And they
Okay.
hosted one in Bucharest for both Romania and Bulgaria. Back then, they didn't have huge Eastern European communities. Now, when I graduated from there in 2000, I don't even know, there were already so many Romanians. Like it was around 10 Romanians per year coming. When I went there, it was me and two other Romanians. It was just like 10 Romanians applying in the admission and like 10 Bulgarians. And like obviously we just a few of us got in. So being like one of the third, or like one of the three Romanian minority in the entire class of 100 people was a huge, huge, huge thing. It was mostly Dutch people in there with some international, but it was mostly Western European. It
Okay.
was not many Eastern European. So it was a huge thing for me. And that's how I ended up in Amsterdam. It wasn't like Amsterdam has to be the city, Netherlands has to be the country. It
Right.
was the university that I chose, that I felt called to. I felt like the fish. I literally felt like a fish in the water. I was like, okay, and I spent the entire because I found it in my no, I was 17, and then the entire last year of high school, I spent it preparing to get in. I got in, cried my eyeballs out. I remember going to my mom. She was actually taking a nap. It was a weekend, and she was actually taking a nap, and I went to her like cry. I'm like, I got in, and she got scared. She's like, what's happening? Why are you crying? I'm like, I got in. It was quite cute. Yeah, it was so cute. I still have that email. I remember it.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. But so, I mean, you said you hadn't even like visited Amsterdam and you just moved there. Were there any difficulties moving? Because I moved from my hometown in Nevada to Los Angeles, which was like it's an 8-hour drive, so it's not as far as like moving to a new country, but it felt like it. Like the culture is different, the big city, like the freeways, all of it is just like. And I but I had also grown up coming to Los Angeles. So I had that, like it didn't feel like such a strange place to me. When I went to New York for the first time, and I didn't even like live there just for a visit, that felt like a whole new like just everything. Like
Whole
it,
new
it
world.
like, and that's after spending 10 years in LA. Like New York still felt like a whole new like world to me. But so I can't imagine just like going somewhere, like going to like a new country and just be okay, like I'm here now. Like this is
That
it.
that was crazy. I mean, honestly, looking back, I'm like, how did we do that? Why did we do that? So, I mean, I know why, and I feel like looking back, my parents, especially my mom, she never vocalized this, but I feel looking back, because she's an amazing, intelligent, smart, strong woman. So I feel like she probably planned it like this because she knew that okay, it's gonna happen. It has to happen. I was excited to go. I mean, I was dreaming to go there. Like, of course, it happens even in teenager movies, because I was planning for like almost 1 year and a half before to go there, and like 6 months before I would go, even less. Of course, I met a boy, and we were in love, and na na na, and all the things, and that made the departure quite heavy for me as a human being. As like, oh my god, like my first big love. It was a relationship. We actually stayed in a long distance. So he was staying in Romania and I was going to Amsterdam. So that was hard. But what happened is that it was interesting because looking back, I'm like, why didn't we go there for like a weekend with the family to see the country, to see Amsterdam? Because we could have afforded it. I mean, we were tight with the money. We were trying to be tight because the tuition fee would be quite expensive. The first year we have to pay for the dorm and everything. So maybe that was for sure one of the reasons we weren't splurging in money. It wasn't like, let's go there for the weekend and see how it is. It would have been a bit of an investment. But also I feel like my mom was like, she was okay with me to take it on. And also she was the only one who was actually really strong, because all my other family members, my grandmother, because I'm close with my grandparents, and my aunts, which are my mom's sisters, and everybody was like very much like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But yeah, so it was the experience itself. Now looking back, it was crazy, because I had all my life packed into two luggages. One of them I remember very well that it was overweight and it had a huge notification, like a label on it for the carriers of the ground force. Like, this is heavy, be careful for those poor people managing my 40 kilograms luggage.
Yeah.
I had everything there. It was the first time flying myself anywhere in the airplane. I flew with my parents, but never by myself. I remember thinking I'm gonna take the seat in the middle because of the wind in the airplane, the circulation of the AC, because I'm a bit sensitive with with drafts.
Mhm.
And I was sitting in the middle of in a middle seat in a free row seat, row seat,
Yeah.
and I was crying my eyeballs out between those two random people. I felt so embarrassed. I was trying just to look up. I'm like, I don't want to cry, but I was crying my eyeballs out. 24th of August, will forever remember the day. I arrive in Amsterdam. I don't speak the language. I don't understand anything. I take a taxi. I end up in a dorm I've never seen. And when it really hit me was when after I mean, I was raised to be super clean and super tidy, much tidier than I am right now. I was raised like really clean, really tidy. So I got there, I put everything super cute. I cleaned my part. I was sharing the room with another person, so it wasn't like individual rooms, it was shared rooms. And she wasn't there. She came later. She was a Dutch girl. She came with her family, and that's when it hit me, because I was walking around the dormitory, the campus, and everybody was there with their parents. Like, oh, let me bring your bag, and oh, let's put your TV here, and then let's put your, because they were bringing them extra furniture or anything like that. And that's when you hear like, oh, I came by myself. Like, nobody helped me with anything. I had nothing to put nowhere besides my clothes. And just like, okay, I have linen because I brought from home, and that's it. So that was intense. That was intense. I mean, the reason why I'm 28 today, but I have such a huge experience and I have the confidence I'm a badass business coach and a coach in general, is because this is just one of the examples of the experiences I handled, which I forget to give myself credit for. I'm like, oh, I did that. I had nobody there for me. Back then, there was no WhatsApp. I mean, the WhatsApp was actually still early on. I didn't use WhatsApp back then. And also, the whole roaming and mobile data, it wasn't that common. So I would have to pay a lot of money to send SMS and to call. So it wasn't like I'm just gonna put my Zoom on and unpack when my family sees me. No, it was like, I'm just by myself here. I'm gonna take some. I'm okay. It's okay. Fine. No worries. Yeah, that was intense. And now talking to you, I'm like, woof. I don't remember. Okay.
I mean, congratulations on being able to overcome that and do that. Yeah, like I can't even imagine just that feeling of like loneliness. Did you ever get that, like where you just got really like alone? And you said you were only one of like three that got in, so that I think that can be even more isolating.
Yeah, so I had only two other Romanian people there, a boy and a girl, which we got relatively close to, but they're in my year. There were other Romanian people, but very few, maybe like three more in the entire like years in the
Mhm.
whole, yeah,
Program. Yeah.
the whole program, exactly. So yeah, that was isolating. I mean, I was speaking good English. I had the certifications because I went to English school, private English school on the side of the public school I was going to. So I had tutoring in English since I was quite uh, young. So I was speaking very good English and I could communicate with the others. Everybody was speaking English because it was an English speaking school, so it was a requirement to speak English. But the loneliness was intense. It was definitely something that started happening. I remember, excuse me, I remember um, in the first weeks. At one point it was a weekend and I was actually on Yahoo Messenger on video chat with my mom. We were using Yahoo Messenger, if that even exists nowadays. I don't even know.
No, my best friend and I, who was actually, she was also born in 1992. We used to use Yahoo Messenger for almost everything, and like we had like our little avatars, and you could personalize your avatars to like the outfit or like your hair. Or you could get like a pet or like. I remember when they introduced like the backgrounds and you could like set up your own bedroom. Like
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah, and I was using that for video, right? So we would see each other on video via the Yahoo Messenger conversation. And I remember I called my mom, and it was a Saturday, and I told her I feel lonely. And that was the one of the very few moments in my life that my mom actually cried in front of me. Like she started crying so hard, and she's like, "If I knew you're gonna feel lonely, I wouldn't have let you go there." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to upset you. I just said what I feel." It was difficult because I was the first one who. So in my family, if I go back for the generation, my mom didn't go to. So I'm speaking mostly to my mother line because I'm closer.
Mhm.
Um, but even for my father line, as I say, like nobody went to university abroad ever. It was. I feel like my mom didn't go to university. She went to beauty school, to esthetician school. So it was a different experience. My grandparents, no, I mean, they come from a simpler family. They just went in workforce very early on, in even poorer situations in my ancestors. So it was nobody who had this experience. In my family, my cousin, he was already 2 years older and he went to Denmark to study there. But it was a different dynamic. He also had his own struggles. But the fact that I was a girl, you know, and I had absolutely nobody there, and it was a bit more difficult, I think, for my family. Um, for me, the loneliness is something I actually became familiar with it then when I had some trauma in my childhood. That loneliness was already in my soul because of bullying in school and some situations
Yeah.
around that. So it wasn't like a new feeling to me, but it reached this magnitude when I was 18 and it stayed with me until recently. Until actually I found a purpose in life. Because if it would ask me, are you still lonely, Raluca? No, not really. But it's not because I have everything, I have everyone I want around me. I mean, I'm still living away from my family. COVID happened and I haven't seen my grandparents since last Christmas, which is not something I want to. So it's it's so interesting because I wasn't expecting the conversation to go this way, but until I found the purpose of my life, which is what I'm doing today and this business with this mission in the world, loneliness was always there because I was always missing somebody. Because I've always had either family back in Romania and I was in Barcelona, or I had a partner who was living in France and I was living in Lisbon, or I was living in Amsterdam and my partner was living in Amsterdam in Lisbon. Like I've never had everyone ever in the same place. Like, oh, I can be with my boyfriend and my best friend and my parents. Never. I've
Yeah,
always missed somebody.
you're accustomed to sort of like the long distance, not just romantic relationship, but long distance relationship in general.
Unfortunately, yes. If there's coaching around that, I can do it.
Thank you so much to Raluca for joining me and for sharing all of these really vulnerable personal experiences of hers. Don't forget to come back next week where we head into part 2 and we're going to talk about just her business and yeah, it's going to be really great. So thank you so much for coming and sipping with us this week, and I can't wait to sip with you again next